here. But
Hi guys, we are live. Bono's Health, getting you 1% better every conversation. Here we are with the PhD candidate. I like that we have to put candidate in there. That is accurate. Philippe Brouillard. Brouillard. Is that close? Brouillard.
Yeah.
Brouillard. My wife speaks French, and anytime I pronounce like bon appetit, she's like, no, you don't say the T at the end. Anyway, no, my wife is wonderful if she's listening. I love you, honey. All right. We are joined here to talk about the quantum mechanics of happiness. No big deal, guys. This might be the most important chapter of this wonderful book we have launched. Today is February 5th, Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. Right above Philippe's head is the little light bulb with the plant coming out of it. We are Healthy for Life, 25 co-authors, collaborators here coming together. This is the series we are doing. I believe you are my 9th visitor on here. So we're going to keep it rolling. Hopefully we get all 24 other co-authors on here. So, hey, where are you coming from, sir? Where are you right now physically?
So I live in Mexico, in the mountains, somewhere 2 hours from Mexico City. So, but originally from Montreal, Canada. So,
wow. Yeah. So yes, he's not Paris, France. He's French Canadian. We need that distinction, and that is an important distinction. It is an important distinction to make. Before we proceed, I'm going to shout out my sponsor, drinkelement.com/fitcare. You go there for any of your orders. If it's your first time ordering, you will get a free sample pack, money back guarantee if you don't like it. I'm drinking some right now, right here. Best electrolytes on the market. Get your sodium, potassium, magnesium. Well, I drink at least one a day. Being up here, talking about being in the mountains, I don't know what your altitude is. I'm in Colorado, the Mile High State. We are over a mile high, a little closer to the sun. So we need our electrolytes, folks. Wherever you are, you probably need electrolytes. The more active you are, the more you need your electrolytes. So go get that. So that's my quick little spiel. Now, on to you, sir. We are learning how to get out of the glass prison, the title of your chapter. But I want to jump right ahead to the quantum mechanics of happiness. Is that the right phrasing? And we hear this term quantum. I had our other author on, Laurel Parker Chan, talking about. Have you had a chance to speak with her at all, by the way?
No, we didn't have time for that.
It's a lot going on, guys. Our book just launched yesterday. So go on Amazon, get that. I think I said that, but I'll keep shouting that out. Healthy for Life. The link should be in the description below. So quantum, again, that term, again, for folks in the pop world, right? I think the biggest exposure of that word, Quantumania, the Ant-Man movie from Marvel. Not sure if you're a fan of that. She said she was a big fan of it. She didn't think the science was 100% accurate. But I'd love to hear your take on just what we need to understand about quantum consciousness and just the term quantum. I think we hear this. It sounds like this like very difficult to understand term. We actually I have a 2-year-old. We just got him quantum physics for babies. So that was an interesting read. But I'd love to hear your description of quantum consciousness and just quantum as a concept again.
Yeah. So with quantum as a concept, the first thing we need to understand is where the word quantum word comes from. And if we look at the beginning, so it started in the beginning of the 1900s. Einstein was a big part of this. So everybody knows who he is, I think. So quantum is only a smart little particles that we can transfer of energy. So there's nothing like in our normal science, we would say, okay, we transfer energy. We can transfer as any amount. But at the quantum level, at the smallest possible scale, we can only transfer packet of energy. So a certain amount at a time. So we cannot have like infinity small transfer. So at the quantum level is everything under the atoms. So electron, for example, would be in the quantum world, a proton, photons, and those little things that usually we don't talk much about those things. And we started to understand what's happening at that world, at that scale, was very different to what we've used to see, for example, what Newton says. Newton says like to have something to move, it has to be put, there's some certain energy to move it. But in the quantum world, all those like terms from Newton laws and the thing how we things operate in our world does not apply. So, and that's the kind of thing, like when they say, if you think you understand something in quantum physics is because you didn't understand anything. So even if for like a 30 minutes or an hour conversation, if you think you understand something, you might didn't understand anything. Even me in my doctorate, the first year, I didn't understand anything. Was some point I'm like, maybe it's not my right path. Maybe I'll go somewhere else. My wife's like, no, 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 just keep going and keep going, and you'll understand. Until I start teaching that's where like the rubber meet the road. But if we go back to the quantum, so we understand that, for example, the table in front of you or the wall in front of you, it's not matter. Even if we're telling you it's hard, you punch in it, it's hard, it stops you, but it's only energy. It's only how it's all intertwined. So it's 99.99999% space or energy, but we believe it's very material. We believe very something strong. So if everything is energy in reality, even the space in between me and you is energy, then our worlds start to shift because we're not separate anymore because it's all the same foundation. It's all the same things. For example, in 1935, you may already know this, the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox, EPR, where you take two electrons, you make them correlate, and then you throw them at the other side of the world, and you change the rotation of one, and the other change instantly. So there's no time, there's no space in reality. So how those things can be possible? Where everything that we know based on regular physics, Newton physics, classical physics, it doesn't mean space. If there's space, there's a time needed to go from space A to space B. But in that case, there's nothing. There's no signal, this non-locality, but this interconnection is the entanglement process. So there's a lot of things that you start noticing that it's like, it's happening on the small world. Oh, it only works there. But if it only works there, what's an emotion? What's a thought? Have you tried to grab it? No. Is it only energy? So if it's only energy, is it possible to transfer thoughts from one side of the world to the other side? There's multiple studies that shows that. Telepathy, clairvoyance, and those kind of things. There's a lot of studies with very high level of results, but you need to be trained like an athlete, never been trained. It's the same thing. So it's a lot of things that doesn't make sense because it's going against to what we always believed. And if we have very strong belief personally or collectively, it's very hard to shift those things. So it challenges a lot of our paradox, the way we see life and so on. So if we apply those concepts into our everyday life, it could be very challenging in some ways. For example, in spirituality, everybody says we're one. Okay, what does it mean? Oh, you just need to meditate and be one, and like, okay, but what's being one? Hinduists were saying 5,000 years ago, for example, everything is one. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Maybe for some people now we're like more in the intuitive perspective. We pass from a religion where we believe things like blindly to spirituality. We still believe blindly, but it makes more sense. But it's still a belief. So if we can explain like those things, like electron being connected, happening, or the 1982 study where we took two people, for example, they meditate for 20 minutes together, so that we correlate them like the electron we did talk earlier, and then we separate, we send them to different Faraday chamber, that perspective, and see how their brain reacts. Then we send to one person some lights and sound flashes to see how the brain reacts, and the other person in the other room, the same thing happened at the same time. So there's no more distance. So we have the power to be one. Now we see it's only not happening at the electron level or the quantum level, but happening to ourselves. But if we're the same reality, we're all the same things. So we all have the possibly. And that's my professor, Dr. Amit Goswami, term at the beginning of the 2000, quantum physics as the physics of possibility. So everything is possible in a certain way. If you're fully conditioned, there's almost no more possibilities, but there's always a possibility say no to your conditioning. So it's try to see things very differently. I was in a conference last week in Miami. We had the expert in the future self mentioning that if you want to create something different in your life, you need to think like crazy ideas that doesn't make sense. You don't know how it's going to happen. Focus to something and you just let go. And crazy thing will happen, like the synchronicity aspect of it. But if you try to think the Newton way, like cause and effect, it's the next step, only the next step, almost nothing is possible. But when you say, okay, everything is possible, let's just think like outside the box, like Elon Musk would say, like, let's go to Mars. How? We don't know. Like GFK say, let's go to the moon in 7 years. People were saying he's crazy, but when you put things outside, everything is possible, but we don't know the how, and you just need to surrender to it. And that's how like things start to make no sense, because we don't know the how. Like Einstein, when he say E equal mc2, he was not on the board. M2, no, he was not trying to figure it out. It just came by him, and they were, how do you know? He said, I don't know. That's the answer. And only a couple of years later, it was proven right. So there's a lot of things like this. You're like, so quantum physics is a quantum weirdness in reality, but it's where everything become possible, and then your life become magical. But science can prove all those concept like superposition. The electrons can be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Like, how can an object be different place at different places? But those concepts, for example, in biology, applies also in this weird world where there's a lot of noise, where there's water, where there's things that we didn't go from the labs where usually quantum physics works, and the absolute 0 point where it's easier to calculate and so on, but in the regular everyday world. But now we're seeing it in plants, we're seeing in the sun. All those concept works because we have a sun because of quantum physics now, the quantum tunneling effect. So there's a lot of different things that we keep it there and there, but why do we apply it in our life and start living differently? So maybe I'll give you some space, Bo.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. I was waiting for something to cut into there. I mean, you got me thinking about Schrodinger's cat. That came up. You mentioned the Faraday box. For anyone not familiar, can you just define what the Faraday box and the purpose of that is?
Yeah. So a Faraday box is if you want to receive no call, no signal on your phone, you put your phone in a Faraday bag, for example. So there's no signal, nothing can pass through it. Even it blocks, for example, if there's a fire, it's going to block everything. So it's very like bulletproof in some way as a perspective. So if we want to send signals to me, to you, and we're in Faraday chamber, technically there's nothing in our knowledge of the 3D world that can pass those walls. So there's something happening, but we cannot understand it. And even with any signal, because it's faster even than the speed of light. So there's a lot of things that some scientists just don't want to believe it, because it's going against what they learned so much at school, that everything has to function in a certain way, like a clockwise mechanism. But quantum physics goes so we can throw an electron in the box and it can be anywhere until you look at it, and it can be everywhere. So it's kind of confusing, but it's all probabilities. Go back to mathematics, different formulas, but it goes back to probability only. So it still can be calculated, but we don't know the exact position. And that's kind of the uncertainty principle, where we can never know the exact speed or position of an electron or an object at the same time. So we either or. So we live in our life. Can you predict everything that's going to happen tomorrow? It's impossible. Nothing can be predicted in our life. Even if we try to predict everything for survival, our brain is always trying to predict the future to survive based on our past traumas and so on. So there's a lot of similarities on what quantum physics says, Buddhist says, Hinduist, shaman, and to apply in our everyday life. So that's how, for example, my professor started to link all of those, because his dad was a Brahman, so Hinduist priest, and he was in nuclear physics in the States teaching for years. And the more he was studying and understanding nuclear physics, the more he started to understand this quantum perspective linked to Hinduism in this perspective. And then that's like
at the risk of opening yet another can of worms. Are you? He's not the only one that has this theory of hard determinism. Robert M. Sapolsky, I assume you're familiar with him.
A little bit.
Okay. So his most recent book is Determined. The concept that we have no free will. I think this is super interesting. And one of your other topics we want to talk about, we're talking about happiness. What is life? Some really big picture concepts here. I'm fascinated by this concept that we have no free will. And again, a lot of the things you're talking about, I think to the, mom who might be listening to this, who has 2 kids running around and she's just like, this is interesting, but like, how do I, practically incorporate it? And you do talk about that in your chapter by all means. And in fact, I happen to be researching your chapter, somebody who is very against, I'll just say, the politics of what is happening right now in America. And she was a little overwhelmed and she texted me, and she's somebody I send workouts to. And she's just like, hey, like, I can't even do a workout today. Like, I'm just overwhelmed. I like took in too much of the news and the craziness going on in the world. So, and I actually had your chapter open and I sent her like, here are the practical steps, just do this. And, I don't know if you want to give away your, 4 things, your practical tool set there, but she got a lot of benefit out of that, is my point, to take everything you're talking about here. But to finish real quick on the hard determinism, I assume you're familiar with that. We have no free will. How do you feel about free will?
So if we don't have free will, so why do we live? So what's the goal of life? So that's the first thing I would always ask people. So why? So the concept that right now we have the highest level of knowledge, tools, technology, everything, comfort, name it, but we're sicker and unhealthier than ever. So why would we live if we don't have any goal and we cannot do anything about it? So why just stay in the bed and just do nothing if we don't have free will? My teacher says, and that's for me makes a lot of sense, the only free will that we have in our world is to say no to our conditioning, to our conditioned choice. Almost 100% of our choices are conditioned. There's always a reason why. For example, if I ask you, do you choose chocolate or vanilla? You would choose based on a preference, a like, a past event. There's nothing wrong or bad, but there's a condition through it. So do you choose freely? Yeah, almost never. We almost never have a free will. But we still always have the free will to say no to this event and do something else. So I would say we have a free will, but most of the time we live without a free will. So I can agree that we don't, but we still have the possibility to have a free will in every moment. And for this, you need to bring what? Consciousness. You need to be present of what's happening. If you go, for example, one of my courses, I just give this little picture. So there's a picture with a street and going with a T. So on the right is your office or your home. You're going back from the office. So if you turn right, you're going back home. And if you go left, you're going to a friend's house. So you're just driving back and you turn right. And at some point you're like, oh shit, I was supposed to go to my friend's house. You were just not present. So you were just conditioning by repeat unconsciously.
Well, you mentioned the term hedonic treadmill in your chapter. Is that kind of,
yeah.
You're talking a little bit about that.
Yeah. So in that concept, so the more you become conscious, the more you're like, can be not what your past is, but be something different and creating a future where you're going to your friends. So at that moment, you chose a different path. It's just simple things. So the more you're being conscious, the more you can become free from your past, because all memory needs perception and all perception needs memory. There's a quantum entanglement. Is it the chicken or the egg? At some point in quantum physics would say both appear at the same time, how everything comes from consciousness. That would be.
We finally have the answer, folks. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah. So this could be a very deep conversation, but if we won't go there, but that perspective is you still have a choice. But most of the time you don't operate from choice. So that's a very important aspect. So if we go back to then, if we have a choice, then we can have specific goals of life. And if we start researching, and that's my thesis about on happiness, and so what happiness is. So when you start looking at dictionary, for example, happiness and pleasure, mostly the same thing. Very interesting. When you look at, but then you start looking at spirituality, they're all saying the same thing almost. The goal of life is happiness. And you're like, huh? Goal of happiness, but some say it's pleasure. So is there a difference between the two? But you look, most spiritual traditions say the goal of life is enlightenment. So is there a difference in their perspective between enlightenment and happiness? So if we start believing in what they said might be right, because there's a lot of things now we prove with quantum physics that what Hinduism, Buddhism were saying, would they hold truths to a lot of different things. So if we say the goal of life is happiness as an expansion of consciousness, so as growing as a person, as a soul, raising your energy, raising your vibration, having a life more towards what energy? We go back to everything is energy in some place. So kind of the biggest problem in science is we try to prove different things, then we have a paradox, and then we go search somewhere else and we just forget and we name it the paradox. So in quantum physics, there's a lot of paradox. For example, the observer effect. I'm sure you heard about this concept. So where the observer looks is where the electron, for example, going to appear. Okay, so if there's two observers, what do we do? So we never thought about two observer. We don't question much of things. This is one of big things I suggest in people. Try to question things. So if there's two observer, then who choose? And we're coming to a light. We both want the red light because we're all about ourselves, and most people in life is like that. So if everybody's choosing as the observer effect, then most of the people would die because we all get what we want, and it's not the case. So there's kind of a paradox in the observer effect, but now it's a big trend. Be the observer, you manifest, you create abundance in your life, use the observer effect. But so who get to choose? So then when we bring consciousness as being this oneness perspective, every paradox that I know disappeared in perspective. So if we would say it could be source, some can name God or name it as you want, doesn't matter, as being one entity, that we're all the same thing. And we're going back to this, then we're going back to what Hinduists, Buddhists are saying, very similar things, even if there's differences in that perspective. So the more we follow, okay, so if the goal of life is everything is consciousness, raising your consciousness, how do you live every day? So if we're living as everything is matter, what we've learned in science, what we learn at school, so the school is what? To get you a diploma. So the best diploma will give you a good job. The good job will give you what? A good house or good money or a good car. And then we go in this concept of like trying to get more stuff to be happy. And like I explained now, we have all those things now and with the highest level of comfort, but we have more anxiety, more depression, more suicide, more unhappiness, and more diseases. So maybe something that we miss on what life is about. And quantum physics and spirituality can bring a gap in understanding that. So I don't know what you think of that, but
it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. We're trying to boil it all down to digestible, bite-sized stuff. It's a lot. When you also talk about, I mean, I don't know, a couple things, right? I don't know if it's more of a sociological phenomenon, psychological phenomenon, but also when you were initially talking about quantum in the beginning, I did want to come back to this. You've heard of the Mandela effect. You've heard of this?
No.
Yeah. So anyone not familiar listening, kind of the famous example is the Berenstain Bears. It's called the Mandela effect also because I think everyone thought Nelson Mandela had died in prison and that like it was like a worldwide shared phenomenon. That people were just like convinced, and then, but that never happened. And the same thing with Berenstain Bears, and what it actually is Berenstain Bears. And it's just this weird thing that seems to be nobody can explain it. I don't know if again if there's some quantum mechanics there. Also, when you were talking about kind of that energy that goes across the Earth, I think on again I don't know what the science again is on 9/11, something that happened, very very powerful event, impacted. Changed the world, not really a very argumentative point. But there was this conversation a bit of this energy that spread around the globe, whether it was sadness, whether it was just a realization that this is changing everyone's life, all sorts of directions. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything there tying back to the practicality of the global piece of it, the sociological piece of it. And then I'd love to again bring it back to maybe a little bit more of that practical piece to wrap up.
Okay, perfect. So if we go back to everything is energy, what's energy? So energy in some ways are vibrations. So we all have different vibration. We can read your brain because we're reading what vibrations frequencies. We keep it simple, even if we interchange the name, it doesn't matter here, just to keep it simple. So frequency, vibrations, all things that our body produce, we can read them at a distance. Even the heart can produce up to 10 or 15 foot approximately. We can read those things. And so, for example, what you were saying, for example, 9/11 is a great example. Now they have different sensors all around the world to read what's the vibration or the frequency of what's happening on the planet. And during those big events, the sensors start reading things that change. They don't know exactly if it's positive or things, but things start to change. So there's no someone going there, the whole planet, because those events create us vibrational. So we have a different vibration. If we're stressed, we have different vibration, different frequencies, and so on. So the more you would know, go in a room and everybody's sad, you're like feeling something different. You cannot explain it, but you have this feeling. So it's the same thing. So how do we explain it in Newton and physics, where everything is matter, is like, just change subject, just change channel? We cannot really explain it. But with the quantum perspective, where everything is energy, now we have a lot of things to explain those things that we feel intuitively, which makes a lot of sense for most people. But we've been telling them that doesn't make sense. No, we cannot explain it. So if we don't explain it, it does not exist. That's the Newton physics perspective. And that's the biggest illusion. What Maya in Hinduism would say, life is an illusion. So we don't see it as it is in reality, but quantum physics show us now those perspective of it's removing this illusion, even if we're still living that the wall is still a wall, for example, like if we go back to what we were saying. So be yourself with 5 other great people that are amazing, better than you. You would become like them. If you surround yourself with smokers or people that are always negative, you will become more like them. It's all those energy, those vibration, you will become that perspective too. And so it's happening at the small scale level or the global level, like you were saying, the Mandela effect is that concept. So I don't remember the 4 things I wrote in the book by heart. You have them in front of you. You're more prepared than me.
The 4 practical tools. Number 1, remember your influence.
Yeah. So what influenced you in life? So a question I would ask is, so what are your beliefs? Sometimes people say, I'm not sure, because we never questions what our belief. And the other question, if you remember what your beliefs are, where do they come from? Why do you have them? So a lot of times people say, oh, I believe in this. Yeah. Well, why? My parents maybe, or my friends, that's cool. Or so do you have your belief aligned with what you want in life? Because if you want something very specific in life, for example, but your belief says, having this, it's not good for you, but you don't know. So challenging those things is very important in your life.
Yeah, along those lines of remember your influence, and you say just write a simple note on a post-it. I mean, again, when I talk about breathing with my patients, clients, I always bring up the fact that there's this intuitive sense. It's been part of human practice for thousands of years. When it comes to breathing, it's chanting, it's singing. These things affect how our physiology changes on all the way down to a cellular level, if we're going to connect the dots there. But again, the fact that it's been part of religious practice, that kind of thing, there's this intuitive development over when we look back over thousands of years of how humans have developed, what things have stuck around. So interestingly, to the concept of writing something down like that, I don't know if you know Neil Brennan, a comedian. He explores a lot of these kind of concepts. He has a very good podcast called Blocks. But he was talking with actually Rainn Wilson of The Office, who's gotten very spiritual as well for anyone who follows his stuff. But they were talking about it, and he mentioned the fact that, Muslims pray 5 times a day. And he felt like that was just the right amount of times for him to check in with himself and just write something down. And he just writes down, like, whatever the privilege he might have of, like, hey, I'm alive. I happen to have this much money in my bank account. Like, that's not necessarily how he defined himself, but whatever that is, just that gratitude. He turned it into a gratitude practice of 5 times a day. But, and I'm sure you can talk about gratitude and the science behind that as well. But I think a lot of that kind of comes up in our 25 chapters here. But yeah, so I've tried to practice that kind of concept of just that check in, It's something I give to a lot of my clients as well, or I'll check in with them and I'll say, hey, how you doing today?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us don't get that. I think I heard you talk with Laura, Brave Healer Productions, our publisher, on the podcast, how, as we age, we talk about what is life. We talk about vitality. People work until they're up to 70, and then and then those last, like, on average, they live to 83 years old. And then those last 13 years, you're just kind of like, it makes me think there's a Biggie and Tupac, and why are we fighting to live if we're just living to fight? Like, it's just, what are we really doing here? And also, before I forget, you were talking about this symbol, the unalome? It
I'm
goes,
not
it
sure.
kind of, no, I found it through, I can't really show it there. I got it tattooed on my arm, but it is a Hindu Buddhist symbol for the path to enlightenment. So the
Okay.
idea is, we have our, we have our arduous journey, our childhood, whatever, different career paths, this kind of thing. And then eventually that's supposed to represent enlightenment at the top. So I think of it as chutes and ladders. On any given day, I might be like falling back to childhood, and then other days, but I threw it right on my forearm to kind of remind me of that concept. But yeah, again, we covered a lot of very interesting topics. So, and I just kind of rambled there. I apologize, but do you want to go through your last three things and kind of give some points there, or any kind of other practical?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. What's the next one?
So your second one was pause and reflect, kind
Yeah.
of connecting to what we just talked about.
Yeah. So if you want to pause and reflect in every seconds in your day, you become in the power of now and you transform your whole life. But it's like simple to say, but very hard to do. So we're so at the fact of just getting along and just being autopilot, and we just forgot. So that's why if you put post-it and say like stop. Oh, okay, yeah, for sure. Breathe. For example, we forgot to breathe. We still breathe automatically, but we forgot to breathe regularly in their normal
and
way.
connect to it,
Yeah.
and so that's the people use that term, mindfulness, mindset.
Yeah.
And I'll share also, right before we went live, I was walking my dog and I was listening to your interview with Laura that we just referenced there, and you also just used the term the power of now. Again, I don't know if you're an Eckhart Tolle fan. I did just listen to that audiobook. I recommend folks do not get the audiobook. I personally could not get into it. I like the messaging, but as you were talking and as I was walking my dog, it definitely made me just kind of like, even just that little extra bit of like change that setting in my brain of like, oh yeah, let me look around, let me see the colors, let me see the brightness, let me see what my dog's doing. A little bit more than just kind of just walking and being in that automatic, if you want to call it, hedonic treadmill. So yeah, that pause and
So
reflect.
it's like
And
I walked my dog, checked, but yeah, but where were you during walking your dog?
right.
So so we need to be more. We're doing so much.
Yeah, and I'll say the other thing that comes up for me, and it's become one of the biggest, I think, quotes in a lot of self-help anyway, kind of what our book is a little bit in the sense of, but at the end of the day, we're trying to give folks all these foundational skills. But I really like James Clear and atomic habits, and that term atomic and quantum is an interesting interplay of choosing those concepts. And atomic meaning the smallest possible way we can measure something, and then also atomic being like the thought of like, these are huge things that are going to change your whole life. But anyway, that all comes back to me, the quote being, we don't rise to the goals that we set, we fall to the systems that we put in place. So to your point, if we can now have, again, that's why I got this tattoo, all jokes aside, like it's that I need that reminder, I need that snap. Some people used to have the little rubber band because they were trying to snap themselves out of something. Literally, they would just snap it and be like, okay, I needed that to get out of that autonomic response. And so yeah, pause and reflect is it's the idea of the book. Again, Healthy for Life, guys, go out and get it right now on Amazon. Kindle version still $199. That's the idea with that comes up for me of how that all kind of connects. And then your third one is visualize the quantum field. So again, for anybody who has a little bit of trouble maybe understanding that, again, you do a good job in the chapter bringing us to that point, but maybe you can give folks a little bit of a sense of what you mean by that.
What I mean by that, so I've did the online exercise, which is free. You can download it if you want to go to if you want to put my website there to help them. So I guide them to a visualization on that. But it's when I'm saying quantum field in that perspective, like visualize that you're interconnected with everything. We've seen like we can call it a web in some perspective if we can visualize this way. If you see and you feel that you're connected with everything, then you can have a different experience of life. So everything is interconnected. We can see it at the quantum scale, but our eyes doesn't see it. Cats would see other things that we don't. So we only have a spectrum of visual light that we can see. Those spectrum of light are vibration again. But there's a lot of things that we cannot see, but they're still there. So now we have a lot of devices to see them. For example, infrared light, we don't see them, but we can put goggles and see it. So just experience that, like, you can feel this interconnectedness with everything around you. You can experience this with doing with somebody, for example. It's easier than with material things, but it's still having this connection. And you can experience things very differently because you have this experience. Yeah, that would be the word.
Okay. And the last one there is embrace uncertainty. And I think we kind of touched on that. And I think we started the whole conversation. So hopefully this brings us back in a nice full circle concept that when I asked you to define quantum anything, you're saying like anyone who claims that they know, they're wrong. And they don't really know. So the uncertainty of all this is kind of the piece we're looking at. So again, bring that back to us and we'll wrap up there.
So there's a beautiful study that shows we give you two options. First option is getting 50% of chance of getting electroshock. The other option is 100%. So you're choosing between 50% of getting pain and 100% of getting pain. So consciously people says, I'll take the 50% chance. But your body's freaking out because it doesn't know what's going to happen. Uncertainty is very dangerous for your body because you cannot predict things. So what it says is your body wants comfort, security, known, because it's much easier. But most of the time you're still suffering because you won't need to change. So when you go to the uncertainty, if you're changing tomorrow, what's happening? You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen if you change. People around you, if you want to change, they don't want you to change because if you change, they change their perspective to who you are. Now it's different. So that's why a lot of couples, if one want to change and the other doesn't want to change, they're splitting up because one the security, the certainty, the known, and the other one want to change.
But that keeps my wife in business because she's a sex and relationship therapist. So
yeah.
Let's keep the uncertainty going there. No, go ahead. Sorry.
So the more you jump in that space, the more you're going to go through what? Change, transformation, happiness. The other one, you stay in suffering, but it's comfortable. It's easier knowing what's going to happen, even if we're suffering. So that's why there's so much anxiety. We still find a sense of purpose in that instability because we know what's happening. So we have comfort. And that's how I was bringing earlier. The brain is always trying to predict for survival. There's no more lion anymore. We still live like there's a lion. Our boss become the lion. Our coworker become the lion. Traffic become the lion. What's dangerous there? Nothing. Our ego is in danger. So we want to keep things simple. So we prefer staying in the same job because we know the coworker, we know what to expect, we know our boss. Versus changing to another job is very scary because we don't know what's going to happen. That's the neurological system that's freaking out. So jump to those places where you're like, no, I don't want to go there. You'll see your life going to transform. You'll find more happiness. We'll find so much more. If you're in a job that you don't like, but you have a sense of security because your diploma is about this, because you have the money, because then you have a mortgage and so on. If you jump out of this, you don't know what's going to happen, but you have going to have a lot of synchronicity, but it's scary because you don't know. So as an athlete, at the athlete level, you need to do this. Yeah. If not, you'll never end up good.
Mm-hmm. You got to always keep pushing and challenging.
Yeah, exactly. That's how
the scary thing. Hormetic responses, folks. Hormetic responses. Yeah. Love it. As you finish your sip there, we'll wrap it up. And one more shout out to my sponsor, drinkelement.com/fitcare, LMNT. Get the best electrolytes on the market, 100% money back guarantee if you don't like it. Mr. Philippe, Brouillard. Is that better?
Or you can say fog if you want. It's going to be simpler.
Fog?
Yeah, fog. That's my last name in French.
Fog. Okay. I'll go with it. I like it. My wife will have a field day with me speaking French. So let's wrap it up there. Everyone go get Healthy for Life. You see it above him there. Again, we're already on the New York Times or the Amazon bestseller list. So hopefully folks can get it, send feedback, start changing your lives based on the information. Again, this collaboration of 25 incredible authors. Hopefully these podcasts have given us a little bit more insight into what their chapters are talking about, and we're reaching more folks. So Philippe, leave us with a little closing thought and best places that folks can reach out to you.
So question everything. I would say that's like, if we have one other tips to add, just question anything and be crazy. Like jump to things that doesn't make sense. So if you want to reach me, it's vitaquantum.com. So Vita, like life and reality, quantum is everything's possible. So awakening yourself to unlimited possibility. That's what I want to push people through. And yeah, I've got free exercises if you want to experience more of the quantum perspective online, and much more to come in English because everything's in French as now. And I'm in the process of translating everything. So yeah.
Can't wait to hear more. And I think it'd be cool to have you and Miss Laurel, or I think she's a doctor. I think everyone's a doctor, pretty much. But Laurel Parker Chan, it would be very cool to see how you guys intersperse there, as you're the quantum folks that I've spoken to so far. It'd be very cool to sit back and hear that and try to keep up with that conversation, because again, guys, there's a lot there. I recognize that I know nothing. So again,
the same.
Yeah.
Just learn.
So again, appreciate you being on here, spending some time. I am going to head out to, I hear the toddler crying, so I'm going to go get him now. We got one comment right before we go. Bravo et merci from one of our co-authors, Najwa, who was on here recent episode. Thank you, Najwa, for tuning in. And we're going to end right there. Thank you again.